specifically need to run an extreme version of that test to even get a number for that phone. And when you do, it will literally come out 5 to 6 times better than the other two phones. Now, if you pay more and get an upper mid-range device, then you will find its performance closer to the flagship. But for the vast majority of phones at this $500 price, you're very likely to get shafted with low-end performance. So I think score-wise, it's only fair to go 4 points to budget, 5 points to mid-range, and then 9 points to flagship. So it's at this point that mid-range is starting to catch up, and flagship is starting to very much cement its lead. Okay. Let's talk cameras, because I would actually say this is the category with the largest amount of disinformation out there. There's like 1,000 ways that companies in the past have tried to make their cameras seem better than they are. You'll get some with absolutely massive camera rings, but then you realize that's all they are. The actual lenses will be these tiny things in the middle. It's like those bugs with the giant eye patterns to scare off predators. You get cameras with absolutely obscene resolution numbers, but then you find that the sensors within those cameras aren't nearly big enough to take advantage of those resolutions. The list goes on. And I would say this was a very real problem with budget phones 5+ years ago. Everyone talked the talk. They tried to make it seem like they had a great camera. None of them could walk the walk. But this has actually changed quite a bit. The 200 megapixel main camera on this $300 Redmi phone is absolutely phenomenal. Take the same photo on this phone versus even the highest end flagship phone to exist, and it's genuinely a toss-up. I would actually say that 80% of the time I prefer the Redmi shots to the photos taken on the Samsung A56, and 50% of the time I'd even say I prefer it to the Kingpin flagship phone. And that's because this isn't just a 200 megapixel camera for the sake of slapping a big number onto here. This 200 megapixel camera has a large sensor, it has a wide aperture for letting lots of light in, it even has optical image stabilization baked in, so you get smooth video and less handshaking. Now that said, obviously you can't have everything. While budget phones in 2025 do generally tend to have strong main cameras like this phone, very often better than the main cameras on more expensive mid-range phones, there are 3 areas where you will still find the cameras lacking. The first is the fluidity. Everything you do on these budget phone cameras feels a little sluggish. Even if the end result is exceptional, you have to trudge through a little to get there. B is the secondary cameras. Have a look at this. 200 megapixel main camera, 8 megapixel ultra-wide, 2 megapixel macro camera. There is a steep fall off when you move away from the main camera, to the point where you would only use this ultra-wide and macro when you absolutely have to. With the mid-ranger, there's still a fall off. You have a 50 megapixel main camera, 12 megapixel ultra-wide, and 5 megapixel macro, which means still enough of a difference that you feel like you should try to use the main camera when you can, but at least here it's not embarrassing when you have to shoot with the ultra-wide. And then for the flagship, we're talking 200 megapixel and then 10, 50, 50. At this price, companies are less obsessed with trying to make one part of the experience exceptional and more focused on trying to eliminate all of the weak points. To create an experience where you can happily use any camera on this phone interchangeably, and you can have an exceptional image either way. Not to mention long-range zoom. Like if we try slowly zooming in using all 3 of these phones, it's pretty apparent just how quickly the budget and the mid-range fall apart compared to the flagship. You pretty much never get a good zoom camera on affordable phones, and you pretty much always get a great zoom camera on expensive phones. And the final thing is more expensive phones have more powerful image processing. And this doesn't really matter when you're just taking a standard photo, as we've seen, since budget phones have now caught up and can do that fine. But what you start to notice is when you try to do things that require more intelligence, like video. The processing on top-end phones is able to bring out more sharpness and more detail, even though the main camera sensors are quite similar. So overall cameras then, I'm very impressed with the main camera of this budget phone, but you can absolutely tell that it's still not an overall flagship experience. 6 points. The mid-ranger is a little underwhelming in all regards. It's not really exceptional at anything, but reliable, smooth, and intelligent enough to give you good quality video and portrait mode. 7 points. And then flagship is still quite a way ahead. 9 points. And then, just before we bring this all together, battery. In terms of capacity, our basic phone has 5,110 milliamp hours, and then both mid-range and flagship 5,000. So it's all very much in the same ballpark. But in practice, you'll find that the S25 Ultra is the one that lasts the longest with average use, even though it's the one with the most powerful chipset. Then it's the mid-range phone, and then it's the budget with the least powerful chip. Why? Well, firstly, the chips that you get in more expensive phones, they are pretty much always based on newer, more efficient tech. And so while if you are pushing them to their max, they can consume more power, when they're not being pushed, they can also coast along using less. Second, expensive phones often have other traits that can also aid battery life. Like, for example, more efficient display materials that can create the same image using less juice, and the ability to scale down their refresh rate super low when you don't need it to be high. And then finally, it comes down to that same old chestnut. Optimization. If a company just takes the basic Android that Google makes, slaps it on their phone and ships it, it's going to be a very sloppy experience on all fronts. And so it really matters how much care the company puts into tuning that software around the specific hardware that they've picked for that phone. And this tends to worsen the cheaper you go. So to give you an idea, normal use on the Redmi Note 14 would get me to the end of the day with about 15% battery left. I'd have 20 on the mid-ranger and then over 30 on the flagship. Somewhat countered by the extremely fast charging that, funnily enough, seems to be limited to more affordable Chinese-made phones. This can charge with 120 watts of power compared to 45 on the other two. But me personally, I'd rather just not run out in the first place. So I would give the budget phone and the mid-ranger a 7, flagship gets an 8, bringing the overall scores to budget